Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ask an Atheist. I'm your host Ethan, and alongside me this evening is the Heathen Queen. How you doing?
Hello, hello, hello. I'm better than I was a few minutes ago when I thought my computer wasn't going to connect to the internet. So much
Yeah, that
better.
would have sucked, but I'm glad it worked out. We were still able to do
Me
this.
too. Yes, absolutely. I am now connected to a hotspot via my phone, so if anything happens, you can blame Apple.
Well, hopefully nothing happens and everything goes smoothly.
Yes, exactly. But
So,
thanks for
if you
having
could,
me.
yeah, thanks for doing this. Give me just like a small, brief overview about yourself,
Oof.
and then I'll dive into the questions.
Yeah. um, let's see. So, if you would have told me a couple of years ago that I would be known on the internet for my atheist activism, I would have laughed you off the face of the planet. So, what I do right now is effectively talk to people about how I went from fundamentalist Christianity to being a relatively outspoken agnostic atheist. Um, I do tend to be known for my colorful interactions with apologists and other folks who
When you say
and other
colorful,
folks.
could you expand on that a little bit?
I sure could. My aunt once referred to me as having a razor for a tongue. Um, and I think that's an apt description. I don't want to say even if I don't like you, but if I think you're wrong and I think you're harming other people, uh, then that's going to come out. I also have it's not even that I have like a large vocabulary. It's just that I have creative ways of saying things.
Mm,
And so I am not the person who came up with this like colorful way of dealing with things. Actually, that's been the polite way that other people have described my interactions on the internet. Because sometimes those interactions are a little aggressive, just a little bit.
But hey, that's okay. We need as many different methods out there as
Yeah,
possible because we all
absolutely.
change minds in different ways. So
Yes, I agree.
your method is just as needed as my method.
Yeah.
So we just got to keep talking about it and raising awareness.
Yeah, totally. And like I've had this conversation with many people where it's kind of like the good cop, bad cop approach. Or
Yes.
if you want to say like there's sort of the analogy that I use. Is it an analogy? Maybe it's a metaphor. I don't know. Where, if you have a bully and this bully is constantly beating up on women, for instance, there's sort of two ways you can handle that, right? If you have
Mhm.
the social capital, if you're a man, if you look like the bully, you can pull the bully aside and say like, hey, you should stop bullying and here's why, because they're more likely to listen to you because they respect you as a person, right?
Right.
If I try to pull that person aside and say like, hey, you shouldn't bully, well, like I'm the person they're bullying. Why do you think they're bullying people that look like me or act like me or are like me? It's because they don't respect me or don't
Right.
think of me as equally valid. So what am I going to do? I'm going to punch them in the face. And it's not going to be like comfortable, but they're going to see that there's an immediate consequence, right? And
Okay.
it still requires the other person, the you or the people that look like them, sound like them, whatever, to come in and explain and do that work. But like it takes all kinds for sure.
So you're more like you're a feisty neighborhood atheist, you would say.
Yes, I certainly would not advertise myself as the friendly neighborhood atheist.
So if you could tell me a little bit about your upbringing and were you always raised like a fundamentalist Christian or did you get into fundamentalism yourself?
Yeah, no, I was raised in it. So, um, mostly. So I wasn't part of a church for probably the first like 6 years of my life, and I lived. I had a kind of weird. I've had a weird entire life, but when I was not born yet, my biological father tried to murder my mother while she was pregnant with me, and so she was like, "Well, I guess I'll stick around for like a little while longer," but then she left. um, and so eventually, when I want to say like 4 or 5, she met up with my stepdad, um, who from here on out, if I say my dad, will be this person. I was met up
Okay.
with my stepdad, who effectively was like, okay, well, I'll just rescue you and she from this like bad situation. All right, awesome. But then when I was about 6 or 7, and this story is still a little murky for me because no matter how many times I ask about it, I don't get details.
Mm,
My mom was, quote, on her way to do something she should not have been. What does that mean? The world may never know.
okay.
However, she ended up somehow again at a Christian bookstore. So for those of you that were children of the like 90s, early 2000s, you'll remember Western Christian Bookstore. That's where she ended up, and they gave her tickets to a little old play called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames.
Interesting.
That's one word for it, for sure. Also traumatizing. So she went to this play, she got saved. She ended up somehow convincing my dad they got saved. And then they kind of just went like full throttle into it. So they had Bible study at their home. I went to prayer groups. I went to, first it was children's church, and then it was youth group as I got a little bit older. I ended up in Christian school. All of it. Went on mission trips, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was pretty fully indoctrinated from a young age. It didn't hurt that my family was constantly telling me like, oh, hey, Jesus will be coming back in your lifetime, so you better get right. You better make sure you're right, or else you're going to be. And even if you are a Christian, you're probably also going to be, because tribulation, rapture, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's a pretty powerful tactic to keep someone in line and believing, especially when they're like
Oh,
8 years old.
Yeah, yeah, it's scary. That's just brainwashing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But that was sort of what happened to me. And of course,
And
as
were
I got
you
older and
also
began to.
feisty as a Christian, or did you only become feisty after you became an atheist?
So interestingly, I've always had this sort of sharp personality type, however you want to phrase
Okay.
that. But growing up in the church, of course, I was taught that my role as a woman was to be complementary to a man, right? And like to make sure
Right.
that the man thought everything was their idea, and that I made them feel needed, and that I made them feel respected and important, and da 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 da. Da. And like,
That's gonna be a horrible feeling to be made to think like that. That you're just
yeah,
essentially
especially. Oh yeah, especially when you're someone that's, it's horrible for everyone, right? But especially when, and this might sound a little narcissistic, but so be it, when you're encountering men regularly that you are smarter than and that you
right.
know more than, and that you're more competent than, right? So like, that's not me versus every man on the planet, but like if you're going to be brought up in an environment where you're taught that like you are this sort of subservient second class citizen, then you expect that the men that you encounter are going to offer you something at all. Um,
Right.
but really, like what I would get is just this very like milk toast version of the Christianity that it just wasn't particularly impressive, and certainly didn't uh, provide any like, I can't even think of the word, but like it didn't show any signs of like above average critical thought. Let's just put it
Right.
that way. Yeah. Sorry, that's
So
not very nice, but
no, no, you're fine. Oh, I hate when ADHD kicks in and my
oh
questions go
god,
right out the window.
it's fine.
Um,
Mid sentence, I was like, "What am I trying to say?" I did not take my Adderall today, so bear with me.
dude, Adderall doesn't work for me. I have
That
tried, like,
sucks.
Adderall, Vyvanse, Ritalin, the list goes on, and none of them work.
That sucks. At
Mhm.
least when I take Adderall, I mostly stay on track. It's not perfect, but
It
it's
helps.
better. Yeah.
Um, so when you were a Christian, were you a, quote, "true believer"? Like, were you invested in it? Did you have doubts?
Yes and yes. So, as an atheist, I get a lot of people that tell me like, "Oh, you were never a true Christian." And so then my
Yes,
question is
I've heard
always
that.
like, "Cool, define a true Christian and then give me a litmus test to like run people past, right?
Mhm.
So part of the issue for me, which is why I said yes and yes, is that I was raised in a very charismatic branch of Christianity.
Okay.
We were technically non-denominational, but it was very charismatic. So being slain in the spirit, speaking in tongues, having all these like,
Oh, you spoke in tongues too?
I mean, I did not, but other people did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like the whole like when I want to describe it to someone, I usually say Pentecostal. I
Okay.
was not part of the Pentecostal denomination, but that's the closest thing that I can like describe it as so that people have an understanding of like how I grew up. So yeah, I was slain in the spirit. Everybody around me spoke in tongues. There was always all of this like, you know, just very emotional manifestations of their beliefs. And
Mhm.
so part of the problem for me was that I did not have these very sort of obvious manifestations, right? I didn't speak in tongues. I was not someone who sat in worship and had like these very strong experiences. I didn't cry. I wasn't like I just sort of wanted to like go eat lunch, to be honest. And so like this was something that I struggled with immensely because part of being charismatic is that if you have a real relationship with God, He manifests that relationship by giving you these gifts or experiences. So, why am I not having them? And so, obviously, I would ask people in authority over me, spiritual authority, or even just like my mom or just whoever, and say, like, hey, why is God doing this with everyone else but me? Especially because I grew up very, very, I think I had a lot of untreated depression and a lot of untreated anxiety and a lot of untreated OCD. And so it felt very much to me like I need God maybe more than anyone because I couldn't put my finger on what was happening. I just knew I always felt sad or stressed or something like that. So, like,
Mhm.
why isn't God meeting with me? And I got a lot of really pat answers, like, oh, it's all God's plan. You'll know in the future. He's using all of this for his good, whatever that is. You're under attack, yada, 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 yada. So, was I a true believer? Like, yes, because I thought, even though I don't feel any of this, it must be right. And I must be the problem. Like, there's
Okay.
something wrong with me that I'm not able to connect, or God is testing me. And so, like, I'm just not meeting things like that. Um, but did I have doubts? Also, yes, because it's impossible to exist in this charismatic environment when you're not experiencing any of it, and to wonder
Mhm.
why it's happening with everyone else, but not you. It's a long-winded answer, but yes and yes.
So you bought into it, but that's gotta be a crappy feeling, like, not feeling like
Oh,
you're part of it because 'cause you're not and you're the problem and there's an issue with you. Like, that's I don't know, no child, in my opinion, should ever feel that way.
right. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And also, if you grew up with undiagnosed ADHD, or I've talked to some
Yes.
people who grew up undiagnosed with autism, and so you already feel like you don't really ever quite fit in, but you can't figure out why, and you
Mhm.
don't fit in anywhere. But then you get to the church and you think like, oh, okay, like this is where I'm gonna sort of fit in because God loves everyone, right? This is a
Right.
universal offering that He gives us. And then you show up and you also don't fit in there. But then they gaslight the fuck out of you and like effectively tell you that like, no, 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 it's not God, it's you. And you just have to deal with it in some way because you can't understand God's plans. Okay.
It
Like
sucks.
it sucks. Yeah.
So if you could, how when did you start to question? At what age or how long ago, if you don't mind my asking? And
No, I
what
don't mind.
triggered the chain of events to start questioning?
So I couldn't tell you exactly when I started questioning. I think because of the way my brain works, there's always been a part of me that's like, but what if, right? What if? And then of course that like fear response that's ingrained, it's like, you don't even think that. If you even think that, you're a doubter, and like you're gonna end up in hell, so you better get your mind right. But I always had questions, largely because it was charismatic, or my environment was charismatic. So like, why isn't this happening? And I remember when I was like, God, I want to say like 12 or 13, my dad had been super into apologetics. And so I sort of started to think like, okay, I can't feel anything, but maybe if I get into the sort of research aspect of it, it won't matter if I can feel anything because I'll have evidence. And that's what really matters, is evidence.
Right.
And so I was sort of herded down the path of apologetics, but like not in a good way. It was like, here's Norman Geisler, here's Ken Ham, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, really bad. Who is the other person I'm thinking of that I'm totally blanking on? Not Ken Ham. The Noah's Ark guy.
Kent Hovind?
No,
No.
not Ken Hovind.
Crap.
What is his name?
I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, anyway. So the Noah's Ark guy, like in the like mountain, or the wall of Mount Ararat, and like it's just a rock formation. And I'm really, really mad when someone in the chat says his name, because it's like right here. I can't think of his name. That's so annoying. Anyway, so I started reading all of these books and putting together, like, I still do the same thing now, except for with, actually reputable sources. And so like I would get my little journal out and I'd take notes on all these like apologetics books. And I actually taught a class to the elders of my church, because we would do like an adult Bible school or Bible study. And so I did all of that, and I remember thinking like, okay, there's like some evidence for this. Awesome. But I would say I had all of these questions, but I would say that I really like went down this path of intensely studying in a way that wasn't very lopsided, like actually reading all kinds of sources as opposed to just the sources that the church kind of funneled to me. Ron Wyatt, that's his name. Jesus, thank you. I mean, not Jesus, thank you, but a guy who cares, thank you. God, that was so annoying. So as I've mentioned before, when I was 21, and I mentioned this pre-show, I was dating someone for a little over a year, and he ended up taking his own life. And it was
really terrible. I could not fathom if my partner did that right now. I would be, my soul, I don't believe in souls, but I would be crushed.
Yeah, it effectively, like, not only are you left with this question of like, why, but also when you grow up thinking that like God does everything according to his will, or everything according to his plan, or works all things together for good, it's a really strange thing to try and reconcile, because you realize how incredibly self-centered that narrative actually is, right? So God works everything together for his good. All right, well then, like, what was the good of my partner that died?
Right.
Where was his good? Especially when I went to his funeral. He was Catholic. I went to his funeral, and like, Catholics largely don't believe that if you commit suicide that you get to go to heaven. So anyway, after that happened, I genuinely thought, God meets with the brokenhearted. He is there when you're at your lowest. Therefore, he will certainly meet with me in this low point, right? Like it has to be, this is the time where I will finally feel his love, or feel his presence, or yada, yada, yada. And so I really leaned into it, because I thought, as weird as it is, this is finally the time that I'm going to feel God, and I'm going to know that he exists. And I don't really know how to explain it, because like, it's awful to think that that somehow it's going to make things better that this person's passed away and that like now you're going to have this experience. And it's not that I wanted him to have passed away or that I wished he would have passed away or like that I wouldn't have taken it back. But there's this glimmer of hope that like, okay, maybe finally I'm going to be able to experience this thing that everyone around me tells me is real, but that I've never experienced. In fact, I've always felt incredibly alone. And I thought maybe this is the time that like that will sort of fade away. And I think it's worth saying that like my childhood was incredibly abusive and traumatic. And so I spent a lot of time feeling alone, which is why when this happened, as heartbroken and devastated as I was, and as horrifying as it was, I thought like maybe finally this is it, right? Like maybe I've really reached the lowest of lows and like God is finally going to meet with me. So I made the decision to really just surrender. And I went and did a YWAM
I'm sorry,
thinking that
what?
like youth with a mission.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went and did a YWAM thinking like, well, if I really just go and commit myself to the work of God and spreading God's word in the middle of my own sort of despair, God will know how fully committed I am. And like, he will meet with me. Spoiler alert, he did not. So at that point, after I had spent, I think it was like 4 months doing that and really not feeling anything, I
Mhm.
thought like something is not right. Like, even though I already knew something was not right, like something is really not right. Because before I could sort of chalk it up to like, it's just me, my nature, my own whatever, Satan's deception, blah, 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 blah. And so I came home and I thought, okay, I don't know what's happening, but I know I want to go back to school. So I started doing some like online courses, condense about a year. I ended up back in college when I was about 23. And the college that I ended up in was a very liberal, all women's college in the Bay Area where I live.
And I'm
And
assuming,
so,
just for clarity, you were probably a conservative-leaning Christian
oh,
fundamentalist at that point,
yes,
right? Okay.
yes. Which is funny because I live in one of the most liberal, I can't say that word, most liberal areas in the country. Like I live 20 minutes outside of San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, like liberal. Um, but in any event,
Were you a Trump
yes.
supporter, or did you already deconvert at that time?
So I had deconverted by that point, but
Okay.
my father has voted for Trump twice, and I am the oldest of 5 girls. So that should tell you most of what you need to know about my upbringing. So I was not a Trump supporter, but that's largely because I was already deconverted. I was deconverted probably in like 2013, 2014.
Okay.
And then was it 2013? Yeah, that time frame just seems wild to me. But yeah, that's right. Sorry, I went back to school in 2013. Sorry, like that collapse of time is just bananas to me. But anyway, yeah, so I was not a Trump supporter, but I was already out of it by then. My dad still is a Trump supporter and would almost assuredly vote for Trump again if he ran. So
Same with my family.
yeah, that's the household I grew
They
up
think
in.
I'm crazy.
Yeah. So it got so bad with my family that over like it was a couple of years ago now, but over one I told them that they were behaving like Nazis and that if they continued to do that, I would no longer be coming to family gatherings for the holidays.
Oh, wow.
And if y'all think that I'm like, this is some facade for the internet, I have a bunch of family members you can meet. I think it was because it was at the beginning of the protests and the Black Lives Matter riots, and one of my family members thought that they could just pop off with some bullshit about someone who had been murdered by police, and not in my house. Uh, and so that was, super fun for them. But guess what? They have never, ever said anything about it since. So I'm here to tell you that making people uncomfortable sometimes works.
Yeah, oh, it absolutely does.
Yeah. Like, I can't make you not be a racist. I can't make you not be a bigot, but I can make you uncomfortable being a racist and a bigot in my presence and in public. That's my whatever. If you want to learn, I'm happy to teach you, but mostly I just want you to be quiet. So anyway, sorry, that's an incredibly long-winded way of saying that when I started college, it was in a very liberal area with very liberal people, and there were so many people from so many different walks of life, different genders, different or gender identities, different sexualities. And I could not wrap my brain around the fact that, first of all, this God who I never connected with, even in my darkest hour, was also a God that I was supposed to worship, even though he created all of these people, supposedly in his image, and was going to send them all to hell because of the way that they were born. I couldn't do it. And so I started researching. I thought, well, okay, I don't feel it. I don't know what to do about that. But the heart is deceitful above all things. So I'm going to research the Bible. And if it's historically reliable, right? Like, forget all the miracles, nobody knows. But just like the main events in the Old Testament, main events in the New Testament, then I will just forego my feelings and stick with what I know is true. I think y'all know where that ended up.
So how long did it take, or how long was this process?
Sorry, So the thing with evangelicalism is that they teach you that if one thing is not true, none of it is true, which is really problematic teaching, considering how easily disprovable so much of the Bible is. So when I started pulling the thread, that didn't take very long, but the deprogramming aspect, the like indoctrination aspect, took a bit longer. So I would say it was probably a couple of years before I really felt like I wasn't worried about the rapture. I wasn't worried about hell, right? Like, that took a little while, because that's much less reality based and much more fear based.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think I came to realize that, like, the Bible is not really reliable pretty quickly. But getting rid of that, like, well, what if hell? What if the rapture? What if whatever? That took a bit longer.
That makes sense. And I'm assuming, did you have other hangups too? Like, okay, so one of my hangups that I'm still dealing with today is, the idea that, sex should stay in the bedroom, and, toxic monogamy and all that stuff.
Right,
So,
yeah.
to give you an example, my girlfriend and I are, in an open relationship. But
Same.
there's times where, like, we'll go to events and I will still, like, I'll get shut down. I'll go to these events and I won't be able to go through with anything because I'll start feeling that shame and that guilt. So I'm still deconstructing all of that. Do you have any things you're still struggling with to deconstruct?
So I do want to say that. Sorry, I'm thinking about how to phrase this. The sort of purity culture aspect of it all did stick with me for a while, and is still with me in some ways. I've done a lot of work around it. But yeah, I mean, I felt so much shame around my body and my sexuality, and I'm a white woman, a cisgender white woman who is, like, primarily straight, right? So, like, there's not, like, anything that society would consider particularly abnormal outside of the fact that I'm non-monogamous. But I didn't even know I was non-monogamous until, like, fairly recently. So
Same.
yeah, so I mean, like, even if you leave out the non-monogamy, right? Just the rest of it, the, like, just being okay in my body, being okay with the fact that, like, somebody might find me attractive, and that was a bad thing, right? And it also wasn't my fault. And it something that I also had to work a lot around was like, there is no actual, there's no inherent moral judgment, sort of, that's not the word I'm looking for. Sorry, not judgment. There's not a lot of, there's not, let me rewind. There's not inherent moral value to many things that I was taught there was inherent moral value to, right? So like sex outside of marriage, just as it is, I was always taught that's bad, right?
Yep,
But
same.
okay, why is it bad? Right? Because the Bible says you're supposed to only have sex with your husband. All right, you don't believe in the Bible anymore, but you still feel like it's bad because it's hard. Just because you don't believe in the Bible doesn't mean that feeling goes away. And so I had to do a lot of work around like, or sitting with, okay, what is bad about sex outside of marriage? What is bad about sex between two consenting people? And the answer is nothing.
No, nothing
but
at all.
That doesn't, nothing at all. But that doesn't mean that you don't still feel that knee-jerk response, right? So like,
exactly.
Yep, like probably 6 years or so after I deconverted, I went to my first pole dancing class. And I cannot tell you, I was the only student in that class, thank whoever. And I ended up having a teacher who I'm still very, very friend, and she also grew up religious. So it was just a match made in, hell. But when I went, I didn't want to look at myself in the mirror. Like, I didn't feel like I could be attractive or seductive or sexy or like any of these things, right? It all felt bad to me. And it took so much work, and there's still so much work to be done. But just to be able to say, like, it's okay to lean into this like sensual side of yourself. And like in a lot of situations, it's even good, right? Like people are made to be attracted to each other. People are made to engage in like
fun,
this sounds
sexy
so
activities.
clinical, but in like sexual activities, right? Like
right.
That's literally what our bodies are designed for lack of a better term. And so in ways, I'm still undoing some of this now. I've come a long way and undoing a lot of it. So it's always a tricky question for me because I think there's work to be done. But there's a lot of work that's been done in that same sort of vein. But I think if anything, that's probably the biggest point that I had to sort of overcome and that I still work on overcoming, especially because, and sorry, I think I'm just going on and on and on here, but
no, you're fine. This is about you. Ramble as much as you want.
To speak to the like non-monogamy aspect, right? Like we Christians thinking that like God has created you and he creates this one other person and that's it for your entire life, and y'all are meant to fit together magically and Cinderella. And then this is sort of reinforced in ways through just our normal culture without Christianity, right? Rom-coms, that entire thing of like you meet your Prince Charming and then everything's a fairy tale forever. And what it does is it teaches us that like you're going to meet this person, you're never going to be attracted to anybody else ever, and if you are attracted to somebody else, that's a moral failing on your part. Or if your partner is attracted to somebody else, even if they don't do anything about it, even if they just think they're attractive, that somehow detracts from the love or affection or whatever that they have for you. Instead of just accepting that we're human beings who find people attractive. And that doesn't mean that we have to act on all of those things. Like, you can be monogamous. There's nothing wrong with that. But like to think that you're never going to see another person and think like, damn, is just silly. Like that's
right.
That's not how it works.
Like we are attracted to other people. That doesn't just shut off because you met the love of your life.
Right. And so like, and I think also there's this weird conception, and again, everything is not for everybody, but like you can love more than one person without the love for either person being less than, right?
Yes.
Like if you have kids, I mean, I don't have kids, but I have many siblings, and I don't love any of them more or less than the other. I love them all. I love them differently, but like you could never ask me to rank them. Like this just wouldn't happen, right? And the fact that they all came along one after another didn't mean that somehow the love I had was then like split and passed out. And so, you know, instead of I had, you know, 100% love for one, and now I have 25% for all four, right? I still love each of them 100%. It just, my love just sort of grew.
Right.
And again, while I don't think polyamory or non-monogamy is right for everybody, I don't think it is. Like, what I'm saying here is that it's completely possible to live in a world where you love more than one person or you're in love with more than one person completely and fully, and it's not a threat
No.
to your other partners, right? Like there's no threat here because you can love more than one person at a time. Now again, I know it's not for everyone. This is not me saying everyone should be non-monogamous or polyamorous, but like growing up in purity culture, you're taught that you get one person, that's it. If you even look at another person and feel anything for another person, sinful, 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 sinful.
Right.
And I think it really makes the world a lot smaller for a lot of people, especially people that simply are non-monogamous or polyamorous and don't know how to articulate that or how to express that, and instead they just think they're bad.
Yeah, that happens to me still. I end up thinking I'm, you know, a bad person at times for wanting someone else. But like, I find that like when my partner and I are intimate with other people, we end up being even closer with each other afterwards. And
Yeah. Well, and I think if you're doing it right, that's how it should be.
right. So are you more, where on the spectrum do you fall? There is three categories in my opinion, and if I'm missing any, please let me know. There's swinging, there's open, and then there's poly.
I'm
Are you
poly.
the same? Poly? Okay.
Yeah. Um yeah, and I mean I don't think like, and that's probably why I speak about this in a little more like sort of multi-relational terms, like
Mm.
you can be in love with more than one person. And that's not to say that that's necessarily the right end of the spectrum. It just happens to be the end of the spectrum that I fall on. And so like but also you can be on the swinging or open like parts of the spectrum, and everything I just said applies. You just might not be in love with more than one person, right? It's like you just feel attracted to more than one person, but that does not take away from the feelings for the partner, primary partner, whatever. Somebody, Cynthia asked what the difference is. Would you like to explain?
So yeah, I'll explain it as best as I can. Swinging is primarily sex-based. Open is, now keep in mind, this is, I can't define all poly, open, or swinging relationships because each one has their own rules, their own guidelines, which can be one open relationship could have completely different rules from another relationship. So it's only the people within that relationship could truly describe it. But swinging is purely sexual. Poly is you actually form relationships with multiple people, and open, from my understanding, usually you can date, have sex with, but you're not forming a relationship with them. Do you think that's accurate, or am I off?
Yeah, I think that's relatively, I mean, I think that is accurate. I think, like you said, in any sort of anywhere on this spectrum, there's, I don't even know what the word is I'm looking for. Like, I can only speak for being poly, and I'm not an expert by any stretch, but like there's so many ways that you can be polyamorous, and I assume that there are so many ways that you can be everything else. But I think that's a general, like a good general overview of what those things are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so I don't know if I don't know if my girlfriend could do poly. You know,
It's not for
we're
everyone.
more
No.
open than that and swinging, but poly could, I don't know if, you know, we'd be able to do that, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Right. And I think also something that I've learned in my life, and this is not to say that this is going to happen to anyone because it very well might not, But I have found in so many situations, not just in my like relationships, right, that I would have never thought I was capable of X, and then it happened, and turns out I'm capable of X, right? Like it turns out I can do that
Same.
thing.
Right.
Yeah, and so like that's not to say that it's that like you're in an open relationship and like you're definitely going to become poly. I don't think that's true at all. But if you would have told me at a younger age, like this is where I'd end up, I would have never believed it because I didn't think I was capable of it. And
Same. Like,
yeah,
just a quick example. Like, if you would have told me even 2 years ago, after I've deconstructed mostly everything, that I would be okay with another man sleeping with my partner, no way. Because I
right.
view that as something. Uh, I viewed that as less manly, allowing your partner to do.
Yes.
I had a very different perspective, but
Yes.
obviously I've deconstructed that, and it's about pleasure, having fun, compersion, seeing your partner really enjoy herself
Right.
is a great feeling.
And also just wanting your partner to be free. To not
Yes,
own your
exactly,
partner in some way, right? Like,
and
I
they
love
feel
you, therefore I want your greater good. And that greater good means being a more whole person who can sort of allow themselves to have wants and needs.
right. And,
Yeah,
there's really truly nothing wrong with it. I've had my struggles with it, that's for sure, and
of
again,
course.
just how I was raised, but,
Yeah.
it's pretty
As have
cool.
I. Like,
Right,
don't get me wrong. It's not like you just wake up one day and everything is fine and dandy. Like,
right,
I think most people in either situation will struggle with jealousy or struggle with insecurity or struggle with how do I process this? How do I do this? How do I exist in this space? But like you work through those things.
mhm,
And again, it's not for everyone, but you definitely like you can work through those things if you want to and if you know certain things about yourself, right? Like I knew that I was never going to be happy having to commit to one person for the rest of my life with no other like without any I don't know how to say it, but like the reason I've left all my relationships was that I felt trapped. I
okay.
felt like I can't commit to this person forever because I don't know what's going to come up in the future and I might love this person, but what if I end up liking someone else and then I hurt this person? Like I can't do that to them. And also like life is so short. And listen, again, I'll say this. For some people that means spending it with one person and just doing that is and I begrudge you not, right? I think
No,
that's
not at all.
awesome.
Neither of us are saying there's anything wrong with monogamy.
Right.
These other types of relationships are not for everyone.
Right. And so then like for me it was like, all right, well, if I know that about myself, I know that I need the freedom to meet somebody new and like have these new experiences, but also still love somebody else. Like still want that person around, still
Right,
feel committed and connected and in love with that person. And if I want that for myself, then I also want that for them.
right.
So like were there roadblocks? Are there still roadblocks? Absolutely. But are they worth overcoming for me? Yes, fully.
Yeah, and, one other thing I would add to it is, at least in my experience, you as a person end up feeling more desired, like, and more attractive when you find other people are interested in you in a physical way.
Right.
It's definitely, boosts your confidence.
Yeah. Well, I think it also so I know that this is like, everyone tells you that your confidence comes from yourself and that like you shouldn't need anyone else's validation. And yeah, that's true. That's true. But also, I think everyone would be lying if they said that they didn't get a boost of confidence if somebody else was attracted to them, right?
Exactly.
Like you get that boost of confidence. And so I think like if you put all of your validation needs because are there some of us that are like highly evolved and don't need any validation ever? Yes, fine, good for you, but it's not the majority of us, right? And if you put all of your needs for validation and being desired and like all of this stuff into one basket, the chances of that coming up short sometimes is damn near impossible, right? Or impossible to avoid. What if you have kids and the other person is just exhausted and like busy and just like, or what if they get a new job and they're working all of the time? Like, there are so many things that could happen where like nothing changes about you, nothing changes about your partner's feelings for you, but like, I don't know, there's a possibility for I don't know. Anyway.
Well, real quick, I got to
Yeah.
read these 2 super chats, and then I have a question. Cynthia, I dig the Heathen Queen. Make them think twice and choose their words wisely.
Yes, I'm really excited about meeting you, Cynthia. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Cynthia's great. I met her last year. We've been working together for almost 2 years. She's an awesome human being. So also
So I've
excited to
heard
meet
and
you.
so I've seen.
Ameet Mathew says, if one thing isn't true, then how do we know that any part of it is true? That was a really impactful in my deconversion as well. And then, where's the question? Where is it? Crap, son of a. Oh, here we go. Question for HQ. Your content is awesome,
Oh,
but do you deal with any
thank you.
creative blocks, or do the Christians keep rolling it for you?
Interesting. Yes and yes. There are times when, let's put it this way, Christians will always provide stuff for me to make content about, right? They're always
Course.
doing some dumb fuck shit that I can talk about. However, there are certainly aspects, or not aspects, there are certainly times when my energy is just like low. But I will say this. What I have found is that when my energy is low, I can still push out content where I make fun of stupid evangelical shit. So like church signs or just like weird apparel choices, just things like that, right? Where it doesn't take much. I just am like, look at this. And then I know myself. And one of my strengths is that I can just come up with a stupid on the spot quip or joke. And then I can move on, right? So those things don't take as much energy. When I'm talking about topics where I have to do research or I have to sort of tap into an emotional well, that's when I might run into a block. So I've just found that if I can create sort of a reserve for myself so that when I know I'm feeling just like burnout, that I can do something that's easy, it allows me to then buy some time until I've sort of re-upped my emotional energy or intellectual energy or whatever you want to call it, to sort of jump back in with the more involved content.
So we only have a few minutes left, but a couple more questions. How did you go from I'm an atheist to I want to be an atheist activist?
I didn't. So, and it's not that I don't love what I do. I do love what I do, but there certainly wasn't a moment when I thought, oh, I want to do that. I only got on TikTok originally because my sisters wanted me to be able to watch the videos. And I was like, y'all, I'm a boomer. I can't be doing all this. It's too much. I don't want to be on this children's dancing app. Like, I don't understand it. I barely use Instagram. Like, just no. So I, eventually got on TikTok, and it was only to watch videos. And at the time I thought I'll make some like dog videos because I do dog training and stuff in real life. And then I found the deconstruction community, and I had deconstructed about a decade before. So then when I saw people sort of asking questions or expressing doubts or wondering about things, I was like, oh, I could answer that. And not because I'm so smart or brilliant or anything like that, but just because like I had spent so much time doing this previously. And so I started making just some like quick videos about stuff that I thought was like relatively obvious. And then people lost their marbles. And by people, I mean Christians.
Right.
And so at a certain point, my account had just grown beyond what I had anticipated. And I mean, to be fair, I had anticipated having no followers. So like any amount of substantial growth was like,
Well, awesome.
yeah. And so then it was, but it's only been relatively recently, I would say, that I've gotten into like the activism part, unless you count making TikTok videos. And then I've been doing it for a little bit. But recently, I've been really fortunate to have people want to talk to me for some reason. And so I've started doing more, I don't know, I don't want to say more, but a bit wider of a reach, because people like you and Vice Rhino and Pelagia and people like this have wanted to talk to me, and so has given me a bigger platform. Tang, I mean, the Better Conference, like all of this stuff.
It's
but
cool
there wasn't.
when people want to, talk to you and
Yeah,
invite you to speak.
it's wild.
It's an honor.
It's an honor, and it's beyond what I had ever anticipated. Because when I deconstructed, nobody cared, and that's fine. Like, nobody had to care. It was my journey, and if I would have tried to talk to people when I was deconstructing, they would have been like, okay. And so like I love that this community exists and that people have found a home and like validation and friends and all of that stuff. And I really do just feel honored and constantly humbled that I get to provide some sort of support or comfort or reassurance or validation to people who are walking the same path that I did, because I know how valuable and important that can be.
Mhm.
And so I feel honored.
Do you hold any supernatural, paranormal, or conspiratorial beliefs, or anything like, essential oils? Because usually we find that skeptics will all be on the same side. Atheists, no, there's a wide variety that still believe in heaven, hell, the soul, the quote universe, they're spiritual.
I wouldn't say that I believe in anything supernatural. So I guess this is where I fall. I don't have any supernatural beliefs. I also think that stuff happens that I don't understand and can't explain. I don't think that means that I need to jump to God or supernatural. Like,
Right.
I don't know, and I'm fully comfortable with the fact that I don't know. But like, I certainly, so like things, for instance, like I in my lifetime have had lots and lots and lots of like premonitions about things and like intuition, and I don't know exactly what that is, and I know there's like some kind of science behind some of this, but like I might never know, and that's fine. But I don't then say, oh well, that means that there's something beyond me and beyond what we understand. I think that it might just be beyond what we have the science to understand right now. So I don't have any supernatural beliefs. I also don't begrudge people that do, unless you're trying to push that on me or on like if you're trying to get people to vote in a certain way because of it. Otherwise, like, do you like live your best life? Conspiratorial beliefs, like I do love a good conspiracy theory, but not because I believe it, just because I think they're interesting sometimes.
Same.
Like, oh, who do you think shot JFK? Like, you have a conspiracy theory? Let's hear it. But like, it's nothing like, oh, these like, what is it? The chemtrails, right? Or like stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't hold anything, like I don't actually believe it. I just think that some of them are interesting, but I'm also someone that loves true crime and like loves mysteries, and I just love I love not knowing sometimes, right? Like, it's interesting, but that doesn't mean that I then ascribe it to some specific like higher power or whatever.
2 last questions. One, I saw a couple videos of you lifting. Are you into anything specific like bodybuilding, powerlifting, or just staying in shape?
Yeah, so I was a competitive weightlifter for some time, and I am also a CrossFit instructor. So I don't compete in weightlifting anymore. I used to compete in weightlifting, then I competed in CrossFit. Then the pandemic happened and I was just doing my little Peloton. But I am teaching, I'm about to start coaching CrossFit again. And I also do weightlifting, like the Olympic lifts, just for fun because I enjoy them.
I used to do in Illinois, I used to do competitive strongman, but then I
fun.
back. Yeah.
No,
It was
not
a
fun.
lot of fun because like, you get to pull trucks up hills, you get to lift those big
Yeah,
concrete
yeah.
stones, like deadlift. Like one time we deadlifted this hearse. Like you get to do a lot of cool
Metal.
stuff.
Yeah. And I think like using your body is fun in whatever way you choose to do that, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't care if you're interested in like speed walking, right? Or just like regular walking or like whatever it is.
Mhm.
Using your body for something you enjoy is fun.
All right, and then we have a question from Cosmic Kyle. Last question for HQ. Would you consider yourself a non-resistant non-believer? That's where I stand.
I'm not sure I know what that means.
I think what he's trying to say is, uh, are you completely opposed to like religion
Like
and
an
God, or are you
anti-theist.
open? Yeah, or are you open to becoming one? Like, where are you at?
If I ever joined a religion again, it would be Judaism.
Okay,
Because there's a lot of space in Judaism to, first of all, believe or not believe, and then also question and debate, and also to have differing beliefs with someone and have them both be considered correct. And so that's, if I was going to, that's what I would do. At the moment, I don't actually. So if you know the podcast that I do or the YouTube channel I do with Red Sage and Jesus, Red Sage is would identify as a progressive Christian. Whatever. I personally don't care what someone's spiritual beliefs are. Really don't. So long as you're not trying to legislate with those beliefs or harm marginalized people groups with those beliefs, I don't care. Um, when it's people will accuse me of being anti-theist, and the reason that I feel like it feels like I'm anti-theist is because I will not stand by silently while someone uses their religious beliefs to harm other people. I just
right,
won't. Um, but ultimately, if you believe in a God or you don't believe in a God means very little to me. It doesn't affect me. And if it betters your life in some way, and if it helps you make the world a better place, then okay. But most of the time it doesn't. And so I'm not sure if that exactly answers the question, but I wouldn't consider myself an anti-theist. I'd consider myself anti-bigot. And the fact that those two things overlap more often than not is a question that folks need to ask themselves.
right. Awesome. Do you have anything coming up or anything you want to promote? I'll have all her links in the description of the video,
Yeah, I mean, I will be on a panel coming up at Better. So if you're there,
which is
um,
June
June
24th and 25th, right? Or 25th and 26th.
20, just something like that, somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
25th and 26th,
Uh,
Friday and Sunday. I will only be there on the 25th because Sunday the 26th is the Chicago Pride Parade. So I'll be going.
right, yeah. So that is coming up. I like you said, my links will be there or in the show notes. I have my own YouTube channel where I'll be releasing and have released interviews with people like Dan McClellan, Josh Bowen, um, Alex Vitale, who wrote The End of Policing, just like a bunch of different people across topics that I find really important and relevant to today. And other than that, I'm trying to think. Yeah, obviously the Unholy Trinity with Red Sage and Jesus, and yeah, I think those are the main things. I'm just trying to be a better ally and put
Mhm.
more scholarship out into to the world because that's what helped me on my journey.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, real quick, I need to thank the channel's top tier patrons: Cindy Plaza, Left Right Left, Ryan Hammond, Kenneth Leonard, Skye, Secular Rarity, Philip Leitch, Richard Gilliver, underscore Atheism, Ameet Mathew, Ray Sylvester, and Gerudo Sand. Thank you so much for your patronage. Uh,
Thank you all.
Heathen Queen, thank you so much. Oh, I forgot to ask that. Heathen Queen, where did it come
Yes.
from? The name.
Oh, so let me say this first before I forget, because I probably will. Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed this immensely, and I'm so happy to
Hey,
be here. Heathen Queen, it's so funny because now that it's stuck, I feel so strange because I will like email people and be like, yes, I'm 33 years old, and this is the name I go by on the internet. But really what happened was when I first started out on TikTok, my handle was Mother of Dogs because I have
okay.
a million dogs that work with dogs. And my friend Zach and I sort of started gaining some popularity at the same time. and we'd do some lives together and blah, blah, blah. And he sort of would make jokes about calling everyone heathens, right?
Mhm.
And someone, I can't remember who it was, someone one day called me like mother of heathens. And then somebody else chimed in and called me queen of heathens. And so I started, I don't remember which came first, if it was my intro or queen of heathens, but something like that, where I would say like, hello heathens. And so actually it was my early followers that dubbed me with that moniker, and it stuck.
Well, I
And
definitely like
now I love it. It's just funny because like people are like, oh, you dubbed yourself like the queen, and I'm like, no, of course not. Like, of course not. I would never do that. But like now that other people have dubbed me that and it's stuck, then like, I mean, what can I say? No. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this. If you could stay on for 1 second,
Sure, no problem.
we could chat after the show. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you sitting down with me, and have a wonderful week.
You too. Thank you.